Welcome to the Joyful Nourishment Podcast. This is a podcast about our relationship with food and eating, body image, eating disorder recovery, mental health, and more. I am your host, Lynn Thorstensen, a registered nutrition therapist and body image coach based in the west of Ireland. And I'm so glad that you're here. Welcome to another episode of the Joyful Nourishment Podcast. And today I'm here with Zuzanna Gajowic. Is that how you say it, Zuzanna?
Gajowic.
Yeah, thank you. And Zuzanna is a clinical psychologist and family therapist, and she's the first and only certified eating disorder specialist and consultant in Ireland with a profound dedication to supporting individuals and families on their journey towards healing and recovery. She also hosts the International Association of Eating Disorder Professionals, iaedp, the chapter in Ireland, and she works really hard on advancing awareness and understanding of eating disorders in her community. Zuzanna has over a decade of experience in the field, and she's worked across all levels of care from residential treatment centres to outpatient settings and private practice. And she takes a comprehensive approach to recovery, encompasses physical healing, body image issues, and the cultivation of deep connections with families. And she also, in addition to her clinical work together with Deirdre Redden, who has already been on the podcast back in, I think, season 2, in their co-joint venture Supported Families. So you're so welcome, Zuzanna, to the podcast, and we're really excited to have this conversation with you.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm really happy to be here.
You're welcome. And I'm always really curious with all of my guests, or the vast majority of my guests, like what kind of brought you to the work of working in the field of eating disorder recovery?
Yeah, it was a little bit of a accident that I applied for a job and just landed there. So landed in a residential treatment center, but I guess I very quickly kind of recognized that this is a good place for me. I really love this population. I really love the very sensitive, very artistic, very amazing people that often struggle with eating disorders. So I was really happy. Again, I was kind of looking for my maybe specialization. I really wanted to maybe go deeper with some, because I was already working as a psychotherapist and working with all different problems, but yeah, kind of just really, I remember actually having a conversation with a friend that I would really like to find something that would spark my interest and that I could go deeper. So that's just, I guess, was answered with this job. Yeah, I really, really feel that even though I never had any serious issues with food, I actually do feel that I belong through my sensitivity, that I really belong to that population because yeah, I can link on that level of just being very sensitive and yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And it's really interesting to see those different pathways in. Often people come through their own lived experience, but not always. And I've heard other people say that, yes, I don't have this particular lived experience, but the personality types and some of the traits that are very common in this population is something that I can totally identify or that I really resonate with. So that's where the sort of connection is. And I just think that's, it's interesting too.
I think it was also easier for me to maybe see myself in this field because I worked a bit with addictions as well. So I think I was already a bit maybe used to a different type of working with people. I think the kind of addictions, eating disorders, sometimes you have to be a bit more direct versus, you know, the kind of classical psychotherapy where it's more just, you know, letting the client lead. And of course we do that as well when it's appropriate, but like I think we have to kind of do both. So yeah, I guess it just kind of, it was at the right time in the right, you know, in the right place at the right time, and it just clicked.
Yeah. And now you're obviously, you know, went deep into it and specialized and is as a clinical, you know, consultant and supervisor. Yeah, and specialist in that. So but you know, you talk about like in your bio about this kind of whole, like, I mean, holistic approach in the sense looking at just beyond just behavior themselves. But looking back, and I know you have a lot of expertise in trauma, so I'd like us to talk about that. And also what you spoke with me before the recording is like that sort of interpersonal neurobiology and the biology piece in eating disorder development and recovery and treatment. I think because I'm a nutritionist, so for me that piece is quite the closest, like that feels like that makes so much sense from my perspective. But I feel like sometimes, you know, we get, it's like, oh, we think so much about the mind and what happened and stuff that we forget about the body. Yes, it's not about food per se often, but undernourishment does have a big impact on the body and the psychology also. So yeah, I mean, where do you want to start the conversation, Zuzanna?
Yeah, so maybe I just say how I kind of landed there. So I guess I was always really, again, I was looking for something to go deep into, and I was shocked that I didn't discover a lot of information when I started working in this field. And most of the stuff was very kind of cognitive behavioral. So like you said, either really focus on the behaviors, just change the behaviors, just stop the behaviors, which, you know, all of us know that the problem with eating disorders or disorder eating isn't that the people don't know what to do. It's just deeper. Yeah, there's like something happens that even though they know what to do, they sometimes very, very motivated to do it. It's not happening. So I kind of always felt like there was something missing. And then the cognitive bit as well was not fully kind of explaining things. So, okay, we have thoughts, we have the part that's making us to do things or telling us to do things. But again, it felt like there wasn't like everything wasn't explained. So when I finally found the kind of more biological and neurobiological explanations, it felt like it's actually the missing piece of the puzzle, that we all of those things, of course, we are our thoughts, we are our biology, and we are our behaviors, or all those things kind of create the current maybe situation that we are in. But I think they all have to be put together. And I find that this neurobiological perspective is really so much less kind of pathologizing. It's not just stop this behavior, or like, don't think those thoughts, you know, this is irrational thought, change it for a more rational thought, which, you know, if it was so much easier, then people would be doing it easily. But especially with eating disorders, there's just so much more complexity in terms of how the brain works, and that many of those things just, yeah, it's just not so simple. Again, I think the main problem, and something that I would really like to talk about, is stigma with eating disorders. And the stigma starts with just even not recognizing this as an actual disorder. There's still a lot of blaming and well, just stop it. Just why can't you just eat? Why can't you just stop eating? This is a real disorder. This is not that people can just don't want to. It's really, I guess the disorder starts when people lose control over the behaviors, and the behaviors take control of their lives, or they're too strong. Again, this is all biological, neurobiological, that the brain rewires to a state that the person is trapped in this constant cycle of, maybe I want this and I understand that this is not good for me, but somehow I can't. And this somehow I can't was so fascinating for me. So maybe we can get into that in a minute.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you talk about like the stigma, and I mean, that makes me also think about stereotypes and like the stereotypes of when we think about somebody who has an eating disorder, and that they are like, the stereotype is young, thin, female, probably white, affluent, and I mean, we could go on the tangents like of the services and the availability of that, and like if you fit those boxes, you might have a bigger chance. But that if you are in a bigger body and you have a restrictive eating disorder, that it's not even like it's either applauded or it's not even picked up necessarily, or things are assumed.
Absolutely, there's so much stigma, and even this idea of the atypical anorexia, just the name of it is really problematic. Yes, and you know, even there's a lot of problems of people in bigger bodies just even being diagnosed with atypical anorexia. yes, it's always considered as actually good action, that they want to lose weight or that they're restricting, even though this could be extremely problematic. So I think the problem is that we still, as a society, don't really fully understand eating disorders, and we don't look at the severity of the behaviors. Actually, the severity of the behaviors should always be the main thing that determines if someone has a particular eating disorder or not the weight, body shape, and size. But I think there's also a second stereotype that it's kind of vanity, that people just want to look certain way, that they just want to be thin. And of course, this is maybe presenting kind of issue, but again, when we look at the neurobiology, it's much more complicated. It's a survival thing. We all try to cope the best that we can with life and with whatever life throws at us, and it makes absolute sense that food would be something that we try to use in our rescue, or that the food is something that we would reach out if we are struggling. So I think this is really not fair that there's some kind of stigma that this is just for vanity reasons. It's really people trying to survive and very smartly kind of reaching out for something that's kind of easily available. Maybe alcohol, drugs, that's not so easily available, especially when we are younger, whereas food, or denying ourselves food or restricting food, is something that we always can use.
Yeah. I remember my mother, who worked for most of her career with preschool children, saying at some point that often you could see like these would be like 5-year-olds or younger even, that being able to refuse to eat was like one of the primary ways they could assert control for themselves if things were out of control, because that's your agency. So like there's a lot of that makes sense. And then when you talk about this the stereotypical as well, if you think, well, it's about vanity, and yes, I hear a lot of conversations in the clinic space around the fear of weight gain, and I just want to be thin and I don't want to gain weight, and or I want to lose weight, or this is really important. But it's like, yes, that's part of it, but that still feels like a part of that's the front. And I think the other part, I don't know if you agree with me, is because we live in a society, yes, where this message is constant all the time. So it just sort of gets embedded in this whole complex dynamic, I think.
Yeah, it's the symptom. It's like, if I know someone has OCD and they wash their hands all the time. If we actually said, oh, it's about washing their hands, it's not. So I think it's the same here. This is the symptom, that the person's brain is so stuck on that idea, or there's sometimes very sophisticated kind of protection system, or, the focus is really around the weight, or even sometimes imagined weight gain, but the problem, or the root of the problem, is completely somewhere else.
Yeah.
And I
And it's
think
so
in
easy to get missed at.
treatment, we're not understanding this enough, and we're not going deep enough, I think, as for, that's my experience with people. I think the common scenario is that someone really feels like a failure, that they've been in treatment and they've been in therapy for many years, or multiple kind of rounds of treatments, and they really blame themselves. They really feel that there must be something wrong with me, because if they're lucky enough, of course, to get access to services, but even if they're lucky enough and they actually are in services, they still might feel like it's me. It must be me, because I've been given all those chances to recover, and especially when there is a comorbid trauma with, or any comorbidity actually with eating disorder, I don't feel like we are really helping people enough. We always just look at this kind of more superficial way, just, oh, it's about the behaviors, just stop the behaviors, or it's maybe about the fear of weight gain. We're not actually going deep enough to help people to understand what's really happening in their nervous system. Why is their nervous system and brain so stuck? And that's why I love this part, because I think even for the people who maybe were losing hope, or they were feeling like, oh, what's treatment going to offer me this time, they actually can discover a completely new world, or part maybe of the puzzle that was never looked at. And it's so nice, because it actually brings so much space, that people are like, okay, that makes actually sense. I'm not doing all those things randomly, or I'm not crazy person that just can't stop, even though I know I shouldn't be doing this. It provides this kind of space to see that, okay, actually step by step we can see how the brain develops certain tendencies or certain behaviors as well. And, it just takes all this shame and guilt away. Of course, not like that, but it's a process, but it's a nice kind of nice process that helps people to be more on their own side and not blame and shame themselves.
Yeah, so the self-compassion can come in
Mm.
through that. And like, so when you talk about that and the sort of the brain development and how that's so that the brain links with the behaviors and that it's not just about changing the thoughts, like what does that look like and what sort of like
Mm.
concrete kind of are we talking about? Like
Mm-hmm.
how does that look?
Yeah, so again, there's many different scenarios, but maybe just give you the most common one. So again, not everyone's going to fit into that. Just maybe one idea of how it could, like one thing can lead to another and so on. So let's say that someone actually had some previous trauma. Again, we sometimes struggle with this word. We think this has to be something huge, or we have to actually remember it. So maybe just a tiny explanation of the word trauma. So I think we don't struggle so much with the understanding of trauma if the event happened quite close. So maybe if, I don't know, I had a car accident because I remember how devastating that was for my nervous system. I wouldn't have maybe so much struggle to call it traumatic or call it overwhelming. Whereas if something happens far, far away, or maybe we don't actually have full memory of it because of the protective systems, like we are very well able to um, minimize or to even completely suppress certain memories, especially if we are young. This is very necessary because we just don't want to waste energy or, be preoccupied by things. So when that kind of timeline is more far away, or maybe when we don't have full memories of things, we really, really struggle to call it traumatic. So this is the kind of detective work that sometimes we have to do as therapists with people, that we really try to, and sometimes we do like a timeline or try to really talk about different things that happened, because we want to be curious about what shaped your nervous system, what particular things maybe affected your nervous system. Again, no blame, no shame, no blaming parents or anyone, just really being curious about what could have your nervous system experience, what it could have learned. And so there's usually much more problems with identifying or naming past experiences as traumatic. People always minimize, or, oh no, that's ridiculous. No, it's nothing. Or, find many different ways to ignore that. So that takes a while, but I guess that really provides a lot of information. Um, so the brain really, well, we have a brain not to be smart and to maybe necessarily create things. That's only a secondary maybe thing. The first thing is to keep us safe. Actually, we have a brain to make sure that we survive, that we are safe. Only when that's fulfilled, we can actually focus on the development, on other nicer things. So that part that is really always looking out for us, for our safety. Again, sometimes that safety isn't there. So different mechanisms or different protective systems are developed that later on maybe affect us, especially if it's like childhood things. We could be, let's say, trusting people less, or we could be more careful about certain things, or we could be avoidant of certain things and so on. But even if someone maybe had kind of the easier trauma, so something really bad happened, and yeah, there's no problem even identifying, it just leaves us with this overwhelming feeling. So the problem with trauma is that there is no separation of the past and the present. So whatever happens, other memories, we can actually store it. We have this brain storage, yeah, and it's clear that it's in the past. So even if we think of it, we are not overwhelmed. We can think of it, and it can be difficult or it can be challenging, but we feel safe in the moment. With trauma, it's like, again, this whole like being flooded with memories, being flooded with the sensations. This is really, really challenging. So of course, in that state, if we're constantly flooded with memories or sensations, or easily reminded of something that happened by the environment, like, of course, we'll be looking for something to distract or to maybe numb. And again, eating disorder is perfect for that because it's very powerful. Like you said, the biological side of, let's say, not eating is extremely powerful. Like, it can really numb us to the point that we don't feel much, or it can be such a distraction as well, engaging into those behaviors. So there's another really nice way of looking at it, that we have the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere. So the right hemisphere is more global. We feel more, we see things more kind of globally, but it is more kind of emotional side, we call it. Again, everything we talk about today is in a very huge simplification. Of course, brain is very complex, but just for the sake of today's conversation. And the left hemisphere is more analytical. It's more, like, put in the box and kind of have it organized. So even that actually shift from, I'm so overwhelmed, all those emotions and sensations are overwhelming me. I'm just shifting to the left hemisphere. Everything is organized. I have numbers. I'm going to just get to that number. I'm going to restrict the calories, or I'm going to, it all provides a lot of, again, that's where the idea that it's about maybe control comes from. It is about control, but not in this like kind of perverse way that people want to be controlling. It's like people just want the basic kind of dignity of having some control in their lives back, So I think there's so many things that we really don't get with eating disorders, and there's so many misconceptions that are so harmful and so shaming.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I'm explaining that
No,
well.
I think so. I think it makes a lot of sense that when something has been overwhelming, like an overwhelming experience, and that is continuously presenting itself in the moment through the emotional experiences and the sensations, that our brains would flip in order to try to keep us safe and functional as well. That just keep it like rigid and tight and focused on something that's, that can be controlled, like numbers, or a number, whether that's like calories or a scale or the amount of time, or how much you're eating or not eating. Like, it's just, it's a really nice way to keep your brain occupied on something that's very specific and very simple, without having to deal with all the other stuff that's just too much.
Or quite the opposite, that it actually is maybe, overeating or binging is maybe the only time that we can switch off. That, again, this connection between maybe like pleasure and safety even, and food really makes sense, because, this is how we, even in the culture, we express love or we express care, so that there is a very strong connection. And it is, again, perfectly fine to try to look for that kind of comfort and support and safety in food if we can't get it somewhere else. So again, just, it's my mission is to take all this like shame and stigma away. And I think that provides space sometimes for people to really be kinder to themselves. Again, like you said, this self-compassion maybe can start, even though it's always hard to bring some self-compassion, because there's just layers and layers of blame and shame and feeling horrible.
Yeah.
I think that's another aspect that I think, when I often talk about this like funnel, that it's like, if certain things are happening often and we keep experiencing kind of the same or similar or some negative kind of thing, then it does translate. So the kind of neck of the funnel is actually, when it starts to translate for us, like, it must be me, or I must be the problem, or I must be wrong, or I must be a horrible person. And so that's usually what the person's already living with, some kind of a very, very, very deep belief that it's them, that they're just a terrible person. And there's a lot of work to try to kind of shift that. And I feel that this neurobiological perspective really helps with that. Not that it's like a trick, it's actually really true as well, but it really helps to get there, because it's just very, like, it's hard to, I guess, maybe argue with biology.
Yeah, and I think so. And I think there's, with that, as well, and when you talk about the like we talked about restriction a lot, how that functions, but how it functions in binge eating and using food for comfort and support and safety, or creating space for oneself, or that's what you're trying to do, is a way of actually taking care of yourself with what was available at the time, or the only thing that was available, or maybe even what the only thing that's currently available. And it's that just removes that layer of shame and blame as well. It's like you're not, because you're not doing this to sabotage yourself. And I feel like with diet culture, that just puts that layer on top as well. It's like, oh, I'm just self-sabotaging, or I'm, there's something wrong with me, or I'm lacking willpower, and all of this kind of narrative that I feel we're being fed from that part of the culture as well. Like, if, obviously there's something wrong with me because I can't keep my shit together, which is really what you're talking about, is like when we're talking about the neurobiology and brains and brain functions. And then when you compound that with malnourishment, you get a whole other level of stuff happening.
Yeah.
That it's not you're not the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're talking about like higher level maybe of maybe things that cause harm. Yeah. So living in a society that's in some way discriminates against us, even if it's because we have a bigger body or our body doesn't fit the standard. That's still a very harmful environment. And we know this because there were studies, particularly for racism, how much racism actually costs people. So how much the kind of living in that environment translates in actual changes in their nervous system, that again, it's that they might be blamed for later, or again, the perception is then that like there's certain maybe problems that they experience and so on that's placed in them, even though it comes from the environment. So definitely, I think living in a diet culture is extremely harming for both. So for people with restrictive eating disorders, it's really hard because it leaves them with this feeling that, well, I have this great thing, why would I give it up? So I'm better than other people because I can actually control my hunger, and I am so disciplined, or I'm so, so it's again, if that's not actually the truth, but that's what the culture is kind of been teaching people to feel. Because even sometimes, again, this is the most ridiculous part of our culture, that sometimes people are really unwell. That could be through the eating disorder, but even I've heard this from maybe people who have cancer, and they very thin because they have cancer, and they still congratulated for their weight loss. So this is an absolute ridiculous part of the culture. So, this is what the culture is teaching people, that this is great, don't give it up. And then on the other side, of course, for people who are maybe on the other spectrum, that they binging and they really believe that there's something wrong with them, that they don't have a willpower, but it's not about that at all. And it just really perpetuates the harm on both ends.
I believe so. And then also, I don't know if you see this, that when people are in recovery then, and they're trying to, do the opposite of what the eating disorder is saying. And often there is like the voice of the eating disorders has many sort of strands and narratives that match up really well with diet culture and we're being taught. So now they're trying to do the opposite of that. And then you're out in the world and you're getting, like, from the culture and the environment, or for people around you, the same sort of message that you're now trying not to do because you're working on your recovery and working, against the eating disorder. So it's like that also makes the recovery process so much harder because of this layer of culture. And it can make people feel a bit isolated too, I think, when you're trying to recover, or even just breaking free from dieting in general, because you have to find other people who are on that same path Otherwise, it's like,
Yeah,
I don't know what to talk about these people because
absolutely.
all they
Yeah.
talk about is their diet and how good they've been or bad they've been, and so
Yeah, and that brings us to this kind of interpersonal
yeah,
neurobiology. So we know from science and from studies that we don't heal you know, in separation. Like we can't really heal on our own. Otherwise, we would just give people books and just, the knowledge would be enough for them to heal. We actually heal in supportive and safe environments. So yeah, finding that tribe that you can really feel safe with, people, like-minded people that um, would help you and would maybe even understand the challenges and so on. That's really the key. And again, this is so hard because, for example, again, my background with addictions, there's so much more kind of spaces for people with addictions to be supported, not only the AA groups and that are available all the time everywhere in the world, but even just structurally. So there's like, assisted living, assisted education, everything is supported. Again, maybe it's because they have a bit longer history of existing, but I think there was probably even less stigma there than there is with eating disorders. But yeah, we actually struggle with that. There's not enough maybe places that people can go to and really find other people that are also working on the recovery, or they can get that support. Yeah, I hope that eventually we'll develop more places to heal kind of together
yeah.
or to feel safe.
Because when you say that, it makes me think about, peer support. And
Oh yeah.
I know you work with a peer support worker in
Hmm.
the
Yeah.
clinic you work with, and I've done the
Yeah.
training in peer support and in mental health, like in general, like, and also in
Hmm.
there are groups for people who say, oh, voice hearers, and their peer support.
Hmm.
But there aren't
Yeah.
those, they don't, the
Mm.
only thing that I know that exists is like Overeaters Anonymous, which can be very
Mm.
problematic in
Yeah.
itself because it comes with a restrictive, some people
Hmm.
find it useful, but as you know, it can be
Yeah.
very restrictive. And because restriction is such a part of any kind of eating disorder presentation,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's questionable how helpful the line they're taking, but the community of being around people who understand and to support one another in that, I think that's the powerful bit. And yeah, it would be interesting for people with eating disorders without diet culture. I don't know if that's possible.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's our dream, isn't it? But I think even if it's not a community, I think even just finding one or a few people, just having that team that will be really on your side and really you will feel safe with them. That's a good beginning. Like sometimes we might even just start with one person, but it's great, of course, to have a therapist and a dietitian or nutritionist on the team. But just finding someone that can provide that safety for the nervous system, because we always can do more when we are supported by other people. So whatever, even with trauma, whatever feels extremely overwhelming when we are on our own, when we are in the presence of someone who's providing that kind of support and feels safe, we can do more. We can just process much more of that trauma and heal more.
Yeah, and I like what you said as well about that. Like, if it was just a knowledge deficit, then it would be enough to read the books or do the self-study courses. And
Hmm.
getting the support, whether it is for professionals or peers or a coach or nutrition professional therapist, that is, it's that, is that what we call the mirror neurons? So when you're with somebody who
Yeah.
is mirroring back that sort of groundedness and safety, and that the other person's nervous system can pick up on that. And I had a conversation with a client the other day who's just finishing up, and we've been working together for about 12 months. And she said that, and this is the first time actually in all the times that she had voiced that, she said, I didn't have any of those things as I was growing up because of the family dynamic and addiction in the
Mm-hmm.
family and other challenges. And she said, I didn't realize how big of a gap that it had left by having being able to have somebody supportive and just talk through things as they came up, and establishing the rhythm of regular eating throughout
Yeah.
the process, how much of an impact that has had.
Mm-hmm.
And this is somebody who'd been living with an eating disorder for a very long time. And it just shows that it felt like that sort of being two people in the room was just not the exploring the different experiences, but like just being there together and
Mm-hmm.
having
Yeah.
somebody else sort of mirroring back that it's okay, you're okay, and
Yeah.
it's going well. So yeah, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just was a quite powerful experience for me too.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's like kind of like a Wi-Fi between our nervous systems, so we can really, again, that's not magic, that's just for survival. So we do read other people. We need to do that to know if we are safe. So when we are in the presence of someone who's quite grounded, quite regulated, and they also are actually seeing us, it's not just that they are regulated, but they are interested. They really see us much more deeply. Kind of they can see through the layers of shame and the parts that the person actually is kind of seeing themselves. That is very healing. So just actually being in the presence of someone, even if we don't necessarily talk about many things and things like that, that already can be very grounding and very supportive. So yeah, there's a lot of kind of magic in the neuro or the interpersonal kind of neurobiology, and this is very helpful for families as well. I think families are often so lost and so terrified about, again, it's like eating disorder is like a bomb that explodes in the whole family and terrifies everyone, changes the normal ways that people were interacting with one another. So I think when families discover that bit, that just being there, just having that regulated nervous system, being calm and being of course, if it's possible, sometimes they have to leave, not to add fuel to the fire, but if they can provide that co-regulation, we call this. So, through your regulation, you're helping to regulate the other person. They really feel more empowered. They really feel like, okay, now I can see how I can help this person, regardless if it's a teenager or even an adult, because that is quite magical, actually, and this is sometimes the only thing that if people are super distressed, this is the only thing we can offer, because this is not the right time to be talking about things, to be explaining things. The cognitive part of the brain is not online yet. So actually that level of just regulating the rhythm, actually finding the rhythm of trying to help their nervous systems to calm down, that's everything.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a good reminder, because that is also the hard thing, I think, when somebody's really distressed, you can't reach them because the brain isn't in the place where it's really receptive for that kind of cognitive
Mm-hmm.
information
Yeah.
uptake, or
Yeah.
because it's in a state of danger, or
Yeah.
um, so, and of course, that's such a practice in and of itself, to stay grounded and not get swept away when somebody else is,
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
distressed,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously how to take care of oneself afterwards, because I think it does, because of course like you said, our nervous systems are affecting one another. So if
Mm-hmm.
I'm with somebody who's really stressed, or highly anxious, I can, even though
Yeah.
I might try to be present in the moment, I can really
Mm-hmm.
feel the effects afterwards on myself.
Yeah. That's why we need supervision and support ourselves
Yeah.
as well. And the families need support, not just information. Again, they need support as well, which also,
Yeah.
again, I don't think it's recognized enough. I think at best, maybe the families get some information and some training, if ever, but there's really not enough recognition that their nervous systems have such a big task. They have to, it's a long run. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon, so they need that consistently to be able to ground themselves, and so that they need a lot of more, they need support. They don't get enough support. But kind of going back to this, because this is actually maybe very important as well to mention, that I think that also takes a lot of the shame away when we can see that, we can be rational in one moment. So for example, I can be talking to my nutritionist and I could, it's very well explained, and I can even accept, okay, yes, I do need to eat this, or this is the right decision. And then by the time that this food is actually on my plate, I could be switching to a different part of the brain. I can be so panicked that all this information goes out of the window. Like you said, the cognitive parts go offline, and that's where I am. That's why I need support. That's why actually it's not about the information at all. It's about the regulation of my nervous system. And sometimes when people help me regulate, I regain that clarity and I can do it again. But in the moment when I'm distressed, and again, this is where eating disorder is really working hard to make people so distressed that they can't make all those good decisions. So again, the support is everything. It's really, people can't heal on their own. And because when they were not healing enough before, it wasn't that there's something wrong with them, or that maybe they won't ever be able to recover, which is often the conclusion that they come with after many tries and and not being successful. The only problem is that maybe they were not getting enough support. Maybe they were not at the right level of care. Again, it's very, very, very hard to get to higher levels of care. People often get there far too late. Not that it's too late ever, but it would be much easier for them if they were there quicker. So the problem is that often people are trying to recover maybe on the outpatient level, and that's just not an appropriate level for them. That's often again leads to that constant and consistent kind of feeling of failure, that they try, they're super motivated, they can do it on Monday, they can do it on Tuesday, by Wednesday, that's a very optimistic actually scenario, but by Wednesday they just can't do it anymore, and they feel like a failure. They really feel there's something wrong with me because I have the knowledge. I've been told what to do. I have the support, even though it's not the right level of support. So it must be me. But no, it's actually not the appropriate level, because sometimes people actually need someone to sit with them with every meal and actually make sure that they are, again, co-regulated with every meal. And that's the missing piece, that if they had that, then they would be able to regain that rational thinking and do it, and then progressively again the brain is less and less terrified of that action, because we prove it to the brain that it's not as bad as the brain kind of thought it will be.
Yeah, imagine if that was a possibility, to have that level of support so much earlier.
Yes.
Because I'm sure you see this too, and what I see and hear from my clients is, once the food intake increases and it's more like appropriate and it's regular, it's happening, other things are starting to come on board too. But it's that catch-22, right? Because you're in that panic about eating the food, and then so it's not happening. So that's, I think, why it can keep people stuck for such a long time. And it feels like also sometimes when people do get access to support, that it's too short. Like it's not like it's 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever. That's just nowhere near long enough to what it takes for the level of consistency to happen over time, and for the arc of time, I think, to take place. Like 12 weeks is like, it's still a drop in the ocean.
I know. Yeah, very often it's not enough. But even if it's enough for that kind of part of recovery, then I think often people don't have the support afterwards. They might be, let's say, in the residential treatment center for even, let's say, 12 weeks. And that was working. That was kind of, help them to get to a certain level. But then there's nothing. Or the next visit they have is a month later, or, this is crazy that, like, how can you go from such a high level of support to nothing?
Yeah, that doesn't make sense either. That then then there should be a step down. In an ideal world to like outpatient levels, which might be 1 or 2 sessions with 1 or 2 different practitioners a week for another while, and then as things hopefully stabilize, there will be more because with even in the recovery process, even when you have support, there is cycles of lapse.
Exactly.
Part of it, like normal part of it. So it's like, and that's where you really need to have that ongoing support to support the person when they are in a lapse place. That's when it becomes really even more important, I think, because that's normal. Like that's also part of it.
Exactly.
Right?
And that's again where the whole cycle of I must be a failure, what's wrong with me, kind of kicks back in, even though again this is not the person's fault. They were doing their really best. It's just again they were left with not enough support. Like the step down is extremely important. That I think at first maybe there should be something like kind of like a partial hospitalization, that you maybe there for the whole day and then you go home for the night, and then maybe you stay there for a few days and then you spend a few days, like very gradual, very slow. And then even if people actually are on the outpatient level, like really they need that support for a very, very long time. So things are slowly changing because at least the insurance companies are paying for the outpatient, not all of them, but there is a bit more support. Like 10 years or over 10 years ago when I started, there was very little support. People even struggled to get the insurance companies to pay for the residential. But we still need so much more than it's available at the moment.
Absolutely. And I think, and then it's really because what you said earlier, like when people have to be often really sick to get the residential treatment, whereas if they could get that higher level of support much earlier, you can kind of it could still be a lengthy process, but you would circumvent maybe higher risks of medical risks potentially happening. And I do think you can short circuit somewhat if things were picked up so much quicker. But and the challenge is that if you don't have health insurance, and we're talking about particular in Ireland now, or in the UK even, like we don't have we have less places in Ireland than they do in the UK. But if you don't have insurance that would pay for it, it's so expensive that is just not really an option for most people, which is a whole other issue in and of itself, right? And the same thing then with if you can pay for private care, yes, you have more options, but then it gets very expensive when you're trying to build your team with multiple practitioners.
And find the team even.
And find them and have them communicating. So it is, I suppose what we're trying to go with this is, yes, the challenges of access to the right services and enough of it and for long enough, it's really challenging. And that just puts it back to that this isn't a person's fault if the recovery hasn't gone the way they wanted, or even if you have tried different things, because like you say, in certain, like there's many different types of treatments. And I think, and many different types of practitioners also, because again, if we're working nervous system to nervous system, you need to find the person that feels right, that you can build that relationship with. And, it's not always a good match. And then it's just find another practitioner that is a good match, if that is possible, of course. So I think it's just like, I suppose what I'm trying to go with this is like to not lose hope.
And that we are actually blamed for things that we shouldn't be blamed. And that's the stigma part of the eating disorder and particularly what really gets me, boils my blood is the situation where people were actually mistreated in treatment, or that harmful things were happening in treatment, and of course because of that they developed certain coping mechanisms, or even further symptoms like PTSD, of course, is highly linked with depression and anxiety and loads of different things. And then they blamed for that because they you're so complex now, and now we can't fit you into our kind of narrow treatment kind of pathways or whatever, people have. So again, there's just perpetuated kind of harm. So that's, I think, the main thing that I would like people to kind of maybe consider, that it's really kind of quite back like other way around, that we often feel it's me. There must be something wrong with me, that I'm not recovering, but it's quite the opposite actually. It's the situation and the repeated kind of situations in which we are not only not helped enough, but also then blamed and shamed for what happened.
Yeah, which then becomes just a kind of a reinforcement of the inner narrative that obviously I am the problem, which is not true at all. No.
Yeah.
So, Zuzanna, what are like 3 things you'd like to say to somebody who is maybe in that space of contemplating recovery, maybe in the early stages of recovery, in terms of, feeding that, nourishing that sense of hope or faith in the process?
So yeah, it is actually quite kind of, again, the process of recovery is quite simple. We need to rewire the brain. Of course, it's not simple to do it. We need a lot of support, and the time is also important. There's a lot of time kind of investment into that. But it actually is very clear and possible for sure. It's just that we might struggle at times to get the level of support or maybe the right people. So just not to lose hope, just to keep kind of looking and not accept the blame. Definitely not fall into that kind of, there will be a lot of shaming and blaming. Just that's why this is important to have people in our corner that will help us to, even if we kind of break and we lose the hope, to keep that hope, or keep reminding us that it's not our fault, because it is really hard. Like it's not even fair actually that people are asked to continuously kind of fight against the kind of system. It's exhausting. We shouldn't, like, if we are struggling, we shouldn't be done fighting with the system, but that's where it is, where we are.
Yeah.
So just never to accept this idea that, you are beyond help, or there's something that will make you the person that won't ever be able to recover. It's not true. And just really look for those supportive people, or the people that you can feel safe with, that some healing can happen.
Yeah, thank you. And my final question is that I always ask people is, because of the name of the podcast, the Joyful Nourishment Podcast, what does joyful nourishment mean to you, Susanna?
Oh, I'm so happy that you asked. Yeah, I think that this is so important, that we move, like we have a broader understanding of nourishment. It's not just, I don't know, being full, or it's not just, like appropriately kind of maybe feeding our bodies. It's so much more. It's actually the joy of company, or it's the joy of maybe fulfilling our sense, all the senses. And I think because of the diet culture, we are scared of food, or we are scared of nourishment. And of course, there could be also emotional nourishment and all those other layers. But even just staying with the food, there's just so much more, that when we are recovered, we can enjoy all that. There's a freedom to actually take pleasure in just eating together, or just being around food, which, I think eating disorder has a way of really scaring people, that if they enjoy food, they're gonna just lose the control, and they're gonna be out of control completely, and unhappy and regret it and whatever. But yeah, there's just so much. It's a big part of our life to actually enjoy eating and enjoying food, and I hope that everyone will. I think also this is like our birthright to be there, be in that space. It's something that the culture and some adverse things that happen in our life steal from us. So it's great to regain that.
Yeah. And what do you do to joyfully nourish yourself?
Yeah, like I never struggled with food, so that's kind of slightly easier for me. But yeah, again, like everyone probably in our culture, try to stay away from, or try to not get kind of brainwashed by the culture. So sometimes that's hard. But no, I do enjoy, actually, I do really enjoy food, and eating together with people. And,
Thank you. And so where can people find you if they want to go looking more for the work that you do in the world?
Yeah, so you can find me in the supportedfamilies.ie. I also have my own website, which is quite old. It doesn't look that great. I have to work on it, which is called psychologyhub.ie. Yeah, I'm open for private practice work, although just have a really tiny private practice, so can't take many people. But yeah, I can also link people with other professionals. So I think it's always safe to contact me, even if I'm not able. That's the other part, that I'm trying to build a network of people and really stay connected with other people who are doing great work in this field, like yourself and other professionals. So I can also link people with other professions.
Yeah, and because you run the iaedp chapter here in Ireland, and I like being part of those kind of professional networks too, because it can be so lonely when you work in private practice.
Yeah.
And also being able to find other practitioners. If somebody comes to me and it isn't a good fit, then to find somebody else. Whereas like, hey, or because I'm a nutrition professional, sometimes, you can bump up on those traumas that are not within my scope of practice.
Yeah.
And to be able to refer out to two therapists and other practitioners that I trust feels really, really important and a good way of being of service to people. So yeah, so I'd link to all of those in the show notes, and
thank
you so much for being part of the conversation today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening. The Joyful Nourishment Podcast is produced with no financial backing, and your support means a lot to keep this project going. If this episode has been helpful in any way, please consider liking, subscribing, or leaving a 5-star review on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on. This helps the podcast to be found by others. And of course, you can also forward this episode to a friend whom you think may benefit. Find out more about what I offer on straightforwardnutrition.com, and if you're interested in working with me, please use the link in the show notes to book in for a free initial 30-minute session. And finally, please come and join the Joyful Nourishment community over on Substack, unless you're there already, by subscribing to my newsletter using the link below.